All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our digital demo number 11 for NWBA. Today, we're hosting Silas Maddox from the Forge and Nail Blacksmith Shop in Cedro Willie, Washington. Silas is no stranger to most of us. He's an NWBA board member and a regular presence at our in-person conferences and events. Today, he'll be demonstrating the forging of a tomahawk. I think I spelled that right. I'm going to leave the details for him to talk about, but I want to cover some of our own administration here. First of all, NWBA offers the digital demo series of Zoom webinars since we're still very limited in our ability to have in-person events. I know we're all looking forward to getting back together around a real forge and tools, but until we can, NWBA wants to give our members a chance to share smithing activities and knowledge interactively. This is our best option right now, I think. We really need to thank Claire Guy, Kellen Batum, Bhakti Saw, our previous demonstrators, members of the board, and our awesome communications committee for getting the series up and running. I know it's not a replacement for hands-on learning, but we hope it fills some of that empty space until we can get back to a real in-person presence. And by the way, our first YouTube video is posted. Check it out. Arnon Kartmasov gives a really cool presentation on Uri Hoffe's ergonomic forging methods. I just looked at part of it and it really is good. So how Zoom works. We're going to put the spotlight on Silas here shortly, and he's going to do the demo as if we're all sitting in the bleachers. The internet being what it is, bear with the audio and video glitches because we're at the mercy of the web itself. We'll deal with things as they pop up. Kellen and Claire are my co-hosts, so if for some reason things go haywire at my end, we'll continue on. You can use the chat or question and answer functions. Most people seem to prefer chat. Like I said, please select all panelists and participants so that all your chats go to everyone. That way we don't miss something. We will relay questions to Silas as necessary, and he'll try to answer them. We have a few simple rules. We want to make sure we maintain a very respectful environment. So please keep your language clean. Also remember we have children that will participate, and these things will be recorded for posterity. So don't say anything you don't want to have recorded and broadcast. All right, time for me to stop talking and Silas to start working. So as soon as he pops back into frame, I am going to spotlight the video to him, and we will commence this show. Silas, are you ready to go?
Okay, great. Well, my name's Silas Maddox, as John so eloquently stated. Today I'm going to make a forge and forge welded tomahawk, a throwing tomahawk. And so this is basically what we're going for today. It's wrapped around and forge welded together. This is throwing tomahawk, and so these I don't get too precious with. If you go to make one of these for yourself, you can get just as fancy as you could imagine, but you'll see these are some of my older throwing tomahawks, but they get beat up. If you get any good at throwing tomahawks, you're going to be hitting the one you just threw into the bullseye with your second one. And so the handles get broken and split up really badly, and the tomahawks themselves experience some level of damage. And so I recommend, first of all, making them in pairs, but second of all, making them nice, but not trying to get too crazy with it. And so a couple of things. I like to make mine really lightweight. I find that to be very comfortable for throwing. I've made them too heavy before in the past, and it's not as good. Your arm gets tired. I've never been accused of being limp-wristed, but a too heavy tomahawk is not pleasant to throw. And so the material that I start out with is 1/4 by 1.5 inches by 6.5 inches. And I've marked out a space in the middle here of 2.5 inches. And I'm going to show you right now how I'm going to mark that for my forging. I'm going to use this tool right here. This is called a marking bar. And This is a relic of my training with Toby Hickman. The late great Toby Hickman was one of the better power hammer sort of instructors of my era or my lifetime. But you'll see this is used cold. It's made from 4140 and heat treated to be pretty hard. And I'm going to use it cold under the power hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this technique works really well because you can just kind of real easily line up, real easily and accurately line up where you want to mark. And I'm just going to give it a couple hits to make sure I have a nice seam in there. So now I've just got my layout line marked. You can see there's a nice groove there. So when this thing is screaming hot and I'm under the hammer, I don't have any problem seeing where that is. And I can, you know, if I need to index the tool in there or something, it's really straightforward. And I've had this tool for over 10 years now, and it's a little slightly worn, but overall it's held up great. I try to nice that I've never used it on hot material. It's always exclusively used on cold material, and you can see it's got about a 90-degree angle there, and then just a real slight radius on it. Here in the middle, it's a little bit more of a radius. That's that. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the forge, get it hot, and if anybody has any questions, that would be a good time to talk about it.
Silas, somebody asked about the starting stock dimensions. I listed them, but now that I did, I wanted you to reconfirm.
So we have quarter by inch and a quarter, or no, sorry, I'm sorry, quarter by inch and a half by 6 inches long.
And that's just mild steel, right?
This is just mild steel, and you know, an easier, a different way to make these would be to make the whole thing out of tool steel and fold it over, and weld them together that way. And if you have a good, you know, if you're comfortable with that and you have the tool steel, that eliminates the need to make a separate bit. But I don't know if this is helpful or not, but like that. And so that's what I'm doing. About 6.5 inches, a quarter by inch and a quarter, and I marked off 2.5 inches in the middle. And this is just a chunk of these Tomahawk handles that I use, and you can see it's tapered pretty significantly. And so I've measured around here and around here where I want my eye to kind of fit. And my dimension that I'm going for around the top is 4 inches, and around the bottom is closer to 3.5. So you'll see when I start forging, but we're going to end up with a little bit of a tapered eye section. And yeah. So my shop kind of operates on the edge of chaos. Perhaps I'm going to go ahead and take it here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just pull down a little bit of material between those nozzles. funky, so I'm just going to spin it so I get kind of even draw on both sides. And I don't know if it's still too hot to see, but this is what I do to help with that taper that I was talking about before. By drawing down a little bit of material down here, when I go and spread this all out, it's going to kind of naturally be shorter at this end than on the top end. And as I'm working it, I'm going to be going back and forth to the handle, trying to keep everything straight and in line as we go. So this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but this is where we're going. So I'm going to be drawing down this middle section here, and I like my eye to be pretty thin. This goes along with this lightweight nature of the tomahawk. So I'm going down a little bit less than an eighth of an inch, probably, in my final thickness for my eye. And I'm going to put this tool on my anvil. It's just two round bars. It's a pretty quick and dirty tool, but this is going to help me keep things straight as we proceed. So now I'm just fullering. This tool is part of the Tomahawk system, which I believe to have sort of developed from Swift and Ralph power hammer tutorials and just kind of typical industrial forging practices that have been scaled down to sort of artist blacksmith proportions. So now I'm just going to kind of slowly work this center down, and you can see how fuller. So once I'm hot, I'm going to kind of straighten this back out again and then go in and work more. Any questions?
Well, we got one from Peter Clark. Could you hold that up again? But I'm not sure which item he's asking about.
Well, then I'm going to go with no for that answer.
Fair enough.
No, that's just in depth, but we'll be able to see all this stuff continually.
He wants to see the test piece again when you have a moment.
Soon enough, this one will look just like it. So this is where I'm using my fancy tool to got the built-in clearance to that eye, and I'm just kind of working it back to straight. And this process does the most good when everything's pretty hot, so I don't mind taking that heat just to get everything kind of back to straight again. And everything I do, I'm just trying to sort of maintain the shoulder. So you can see it's not nearly quite the extent that it used to be. And if I do this right, these radiuses start to establish kind of my tomahawk shape. And so you can see right here, I wasn't as diligent, got back a little farther, but that's okay. We'll be able to clean that up. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'll come back to the power hammer and spread this out a little bit more.
I know we're going to be asked, so maybe you can show us that tool you have on your anvil.
I might be able to. Starting to get a little warm, but this is a quick and dirty blacksmith tool. So that's it. It's just a couple of pieces of round bar welded quickly to a saddle, and then I just put the strap in to keep them from blowing out. And it seems to do the trick. That, did you all see that? Is that good?
Yeah, that looks good.
So I'm going flat side down on the puller. Nice thing about these pullers is you can use them in the round box platters. And so if you have some kind of a taper or something, this can follow it a little bit. You use the round side out. So we're just creeping up on it. I don't want to do anything too crazy quite yet. So I was saying that my shop is always kind of bordering on the edge of chaos. I'm not, I really like things to be organized, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I'm trying to keep everything real tidy for the demo, or at least the tools that I'm using. I'm kind of like, when I get into it, sometimes things get a little crazy, but we'll try to keep it contained throughout the day. So I'm always trying to keep this edge kind of hung off of the anvil when I'm for this, this transition, so I don't pass it flat. If I can help it. And I'm just trying to keep things really nice and even. Making a tomahawk is an exercise in trying to make two sides of the same thing the same. It's an exercise in symmetry. And as those of you who have made tongs and things like that before know, keeping everything symmetrical when forging is one of the biggest challenges we face. Anybody can make something nice once, but to make two that are just the same is a whole different challenge. So I think I mentioned briefly before, I usually make tomahawks in pairs. When you're throwing tomahawks, it doesn't do any good to just have one. You don't want to just throw and then have to walk. You always want to have two tomahawks. And so I'm only doing one today in the interest of expediency. But so not only do you have to try to make two that are the same, you have to make two sides of it, and you have to try to make it that. So I'm a little thrown off right now. I had to turn my anvil around for this demonstration. Typically, I would work from this side of the anvil, but my back would be to y'all in this camera shot scenario. And so, anyway, it's a little bit disorienting and everything else, so just bear with me. So, give you a close up. You can see I'm getting pretty close.
Hold it a little higher, Silas.
How's that?
There you
So
go.
I'm getting pretty close to my 4 inches. And so I don't want to go too much farther because there's going to be a bunch of cleanup and kind of fussing around as we go. Because I do have my taper. This shoulder here is a little bit more raggedy than I prefer, but I might be able to get in there and clean that up a bit. And so I'm just going to take one more heat on this and just try to tidy it up with the bars, and then we'll move on to the next part of it.
When you said you marked off a distance from each end, how much was that?
Well, it's 2 inches from each end, but most importantly, it's 2.5 inches in the middle.
Okay.
Because that middle dimension is what's really important, because that's what makes your eye, and it has to fit the grip. And so I went ahead at one point and bought. Talk about the grip here in a little bit. I don't want, my Forge is running really hot right now, so the Forge all this later. I just want to keep an eye on this here so we don't get out of it. So the next tool I'm going to use, this is just a block. This is also part of the sort of Toby Hickman system. This thing has been very well used over the years. It's made from 4140. It's got radius edges on 2 sides and then a little bit sharper edges on the other side. And so I'm going to use this to just kind of set those shoulders down a little bit. And this is a really useful tool that has many applications. Try to tidy things up a bit. Looks really pretty. Besides that kind of wonky shoulder, this is looking pretty good.
Silas,
So I'm done. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm done messing with that middle for now. We'll go back and clean it up a little bit later. I'm going to just try out this camera angle here. And it's a little bit different than what I did my test with yesterday, but this, I think you can see the profile of what I'm doing a little bit better when we're here. So if we need any adjustments. I'm still going to be going back and forth to the power hammer a little bit. But here you can see my Forge. I'll talk about the Forge a little bit later. I know usually we have questions about that stuff. Here we go. So now I'm going to start setting the Tomahawk profile. And I'm going to use what would commonly be referred to as a half-phase flow. Forge this down a little bit. Okay, so you can kind of see what it looked like before and what I'm looking like now. And I'm going to spin it. If I was making a bunch of these or something, I might just do this whole drawing out process on each side at once. But in the interest of trying to keep these really symmetrical, I'm just going to go back and forth from side to side and do each step and just try to keep it the same. John, did we have a question from before?
We did. Somebody asked about what kind of power hammer you had. What's the weight?
That question. I have an Anyang 165. So it's 165 pounds or 75 kilo pneumatic air hammer. And let's shut it off for a minute. I won't need it. And it's great. It's a great hammer. The guy James Johnson, who imports them now, has done some development work, and they're actually nicer now than what mine is. But I would highly recommend it. It's a cast iron frame hammer. I did have to put a new motor on mine. I had to buy a Baldor Main USA motor because the Chinese motor that came with it crapped out on me. And so I think he put different motors than what they were shipping there. I think he put leg motors on now. So that problem should be solved. So I'm just gonna do the same thing. Forward.
You're using a rounded edge of the anvil there, right?
I am. If this thing wasn't in my way, I might actually come over here more to where I had a little bit sharper corner. But the important thing is where this shoulder is, I'm trying to keep that hung off of the handle there and just kind of match that radius that I've already got going in there. And so now as I'm doing this, I like to just do these little tracings on the step of my anvil here, because that doesn't usually get forged on, and that will kind of allow me to check from one side to the other. And really, we're looking pretty darn good there. So pretty happy with this right now where we're at. So you can kind of see that. You getting a good view there?
Yes.
And so you can see what my edge profile is looking like. And now I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the power hammer and the anvil, and I'm going to draw these out a little bit more.
There was a question about the tooling you use on your power hammer. Do you weld your handles on, or do you actually use a single piece and forge them in one piece?
A little of both. This one is a round back platter. These are all forged out of one piece. This one has a handle welded on. This tool I actually didn't make, but I had it for years and used it for years, and it has a welded on handle. Welded on handles tend to break off eventually if you abuse them, which any kind of power hammer work is inherently abusive. And so, but part of it is about expediency and efficiency of materials and everything else. And so, I don't know. It just depends on what it is. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to use this fuller to spread the material a little bit, and then we're just going to pound it flat, kind of work back and forth, keeping it shape and nice and tight. So that's where we're at there. Let's do probably one more. Yeah, so I've got holes in my power hammer guy. You probably can't really see from this angle, but maybe from that other one you could. And I have a bunch of clamp-on guys that are in different profiles. This is kind of one set. Really sharp pullers. I've got pullers in all different radiuses. And those are typically made from tool steel and then welded on the mild steel saddle. That system is good. It's okay, I should say. It's not like the best, but it works. So we're creeping up on it here. I'm pretty happy with just roughly where this is at. What I don't like is these ridges in here. I'm going to take another heat, really try to planish that out, because this is the surface that's going to get forge welded. And so I'm going to actually grind it flat, and the better job I do of planishing this out nice and flat, the less grinding I have to do to get down to the bottom of those bumps. So right now I'm going to start getting real fussy about brushing and planishing, and then I'm going to work on the other side, and then we'll probably have to go back and forth a little bit just to get them nice and even. So for the brushing, I use this block brush a lot. Out of the frame here, I also have a 4.5-inch angle grinder with a cup on it, and so I'll probably use that as well just to expedite this process and try to do a really good job get the scale off. It's not like a huge deal because I am going to grind it, but it's just going to save me time at the grinder. There's an old saying that says, one heat at the forge will save you an hour at the bench or something. That might be an exaggeration of it, but it really is true that the closer you can get to the forge, it'll really save you a lot from your cold work. Some people are like fanatic brushers, just like brushing their work every time it comes out of the forge, I'm not that person. Part of it is my personality. Part of it is I feel like it wastes a lot of time and a lot of heat. And so there's definitely different schools of thought on that. And you know, like I said, part of it is a personality issue for me. But there's no doubt that, you know, it's not a bad idea to sort of scrape the scale off. Do we have any questions at the moment?
Actually, yeah, it had to do with getting the scale off. Jim Carley asked if there's a benefit to hitting it while it's really hot like that with the brush.
Well, the scale has a different coefficient of expansion than the underlying steel. And so, like a real effective way to pop scale off is to use an oxyacetylene torch, or an oxypropane torch that I have, because the scale kind of expands differently and will actually pop off when it's kind of flat heated. And so, a lot of times when you get it hot, it does loosen up the scale and it makes it easier to come off. But if you're like me and don't scrape it off every time, sometimes it gets heat in and it gets really stubborn. And so, you know, I don't know. It definitely is good to get the scale off, you know, as much as possible as you're working. And scale will come off differently at different heats. You just kind of have to figure out what works best to do. Sometimes kind of like a dull red heat, like if you put it in the forge and don't get it quite all the way hot, that can work really well. Scale pretty much preferred. So I'm going to come over here and do this other side.
Another question we had was, and I think I asked you earlier, are you going to put a tool steel bit in this Tomahawk, or are you just going to harden the edge?
You know, I'm going to put a tool steel bit in just because I like it. It's more fancy that way. I actually helped my kid make a little kid-size Tomahawk during quarantine. And this is just mild steel, forge welded together, and then we case harden the edge. And, you know, it's still pretty sharp, and he, like, eats this stuff. He chops wood with it and throws it, and, you know, it's gotten a little ragged, but overall it's held up really well. And so, you know, just for utility throwing Tomahawks, I know Daryl Nelson has said this. He just makes his out of mild steel. He doesn't fuss around with putting a bit in there. And so that's kind of that.
What are your thoughts on Super Quench?
You know, I don't have any in my shop, but overall, you know, I found it to be useful and effective. I taught a workshop once where we made a batch of it and sort of tested our results. And it seems to be very effective. I'm more a fan of, when I say I'm a fan of, it's just kind of a relative thing. I tend to case harden things just because I have the case hardening compound, and I'm familiar with that process and whatever. So you can see we're starting to creep up on it. I'm still a little bigger over here than I am here. So I'm just going to keep working this out, try to get a nice even. So yeah, in all blacksmithing, there's about a million different ways to do any given process, and usually there's 2 or 3 ways that are, pretty effective and might be good ways. And so, I would say that case hardening and super quenching are probably equally effective. I don't know exactly. But yeah, so, what it really comes down to is choose what you have. And I have a lot of tools and equipment in my shop, but I'm also not one of these people that has all the tools and all the equipment. Or all the resources to make it happen. And so, like I said, it's mostly just important that you use what you have. And Super Clench is a very affordable and effective way to get some additional hardness out of mild steel. So I'm going to do my thing again here. I'm going to trace out my profile here. And see where I am side to side. So this one here, this first one I did is a little bit fatter than this one. And I can see that this one's a little bit thinner here. So I'm going to take another heat on this. This is going to be my planishing heat. And we'll just forge it down a little bit, try to get a little bit of extra width out of it. At some point, we might have to kind of go back and forth. And, pretty well done with that now.
While we're waiting for that to heat, I just wanted to get a couple of commercials in. First of all, Silas has agreed to auction off his Tomahawk plus another one he has. Current bids are up to $75. So if you want one of his custom Tomahawks, please jump on the bidding. It's on the chat screen. And Kellen Batham is going to be our auctioneer today. And also, by the way, if you want to donate to NWBA, go on to www.blacksmith.org and hit that donate button. We could appreciate any help we can get, because we haven't had the spring conference this year, and things are not looking good for in-person events. So we want to keep these things going, and it does cost money in some cases to put these things on. So any little bit helps. If you can spare a bit, please do. Bids are up to 80.
I'd like to add to that, and just, make an appeal. I am an NWBA board member, and, all organizations across the spectrum are facing sort of unprecedented financial challenges as a result of this pandemic we're in the middle of. And all of these demos have been given free, or as donations by all the people who've done them. And just getting ready for this demo, I had like 12 hours, a day and a half in my shop doing nothing but just getting ready for this. And so it's an incredible amount of effort that these demonstrators have put in. And they're not getting paid at this point. But the NWBA is the only organization that's doing anything like this, blacksmithing organization, anything like this right now. BANA, the national organization, has nothing. None of the local saw this was demo number 11 that the NWBA has put on. So just a huge thanks to our President Kellen and the whole communications committee and everybody who's worked so hard on these things and all the demonstrators, because these auctions have been able to raise some much needed revenue, and all of your donations really do make a difference. And I saw some of the guys in California were sort of suggesting that they just go to the California organization and make a donation similar in value to what they would have spent to attend the spring conference, even though that conference wasn't going on, just to try to ensure the financial health of the organization. And so I know a lot of people are struggling financially right now, but any little bit you can do really helps. And we as the board are really trying to continue to provide value from the NWBA, even though we can't meet in person. So anyway, there's my little pitch. I am going to be I have offered 2 of these Tomahawk up for auction. One is this one that I already made here, and then the other one will be the one I make today, or if this one gets screwed up, a nice one that's equivalent. But these Tomahawks are best in pairs, and the auction is for one, but the winning bidder has the option to take both of them. And so, if you want to do that and are feeling generous and like you want to throw some Tomahawks in your backyard, I would encourage you to do that. So we're pretty darn close here on this blank. I'm just going to take one more heat. Well, the old one more heat trick, but I'm just going to take a couple sort of tune-up heats and just try to clean up all of this business a little bit, and then this part of it will be done. So.
Bids are up to $100.
Awesome. Just to clarify, these Tomahawks will come on with handles as well, ready to go. So the handles really, I made this handle black for photo taking purposes, and I think they look really nice this way. But the handles are sort of a disposable item. They do get chopped up and split up and everything like that if you are actually using these things for throwing. So when you're making these on yourself, first of all, I would say if you're going to go out and buy handles, buy a bunch of them. Make your tooling to fit the handles, and then don't get too fussy about it. This forge is running really hot, which is good because we're going to be forge welding here in a few minutes. But we got to not get distracted. Still under control here.
Silas, where do you source your handles?
I should have looked it up before this demo, but there's an outfit in Virginia that makes the Tomahawk handles, and I bought 50 or 100 of them about 10 years ago, and I still have maybe 20 left. And so I haven't had to buy them, but I did just kind of look them up again recently. I forget what the name of it is, but if you search Tomahawk Handles on the internet, you can get them in all grades of wood. They make pipe Tomahawk handles and everything else. And I think that the most important thing to do is to get one that you like, one shape that you like, and then get a bunch of them if you want to make these things. Because, like I said, they do get used up, and then you can make specific tooling for it. So this is done for now. I'm going to grind these surfaces. I'm going to let it cool down, and we'll talk about the tooling and stuff like that here real quick. And if anybody has any questions as well, I'm also going to forge out my bit of tool steel. So this is just a little chunk of 5160. Just because I had it, 5160 doesn't weld particularly well to itself, but Jeffrey Funk actually told me, I made some tomahawks out of 5160 one time, the whole thing, and just wrapped them around and forge welded them together. And the weld didn't hold, and they started to delaminate. And so then I never did it again. And the whole world of forge welding has evolved so much in the last 10 years with all the knife makers and the Damascus schematics and everything. And so I've been told that you can get chrome steels, which 5160 is a chrome steel to weld to each other under ideal circumstances, but I'm not in an ideal circumstance. So, but it turns out that welding 5160 to mild steel or rod. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about some of the other tooling we have here real quick. Drift that I bought once that is the right shape for these Tomahawk handles that I have, and it says TD1 or TDI or something on the cast into the drift. And what I did with that is I made myself a spring swage, and that allows me to reproduce this drift profile in any kind of tool steel or whatever kind of material that I want. Because the fact that this is made out of cast iron is scary to me. I feel like it's going to break one day. And so I made this spring swage, and then I took it to the East Coast for a class that I taught in tomahawk making. I cut the spring off of it. And while I was there, I sold all my tooling to one of my students. And that was 3 years ago. And then I came home, and you can see this thing is still in 2 pieces. And I don't have any of that original tooling that I made with it. And I thought, oh, no problem. I'll sell this, and I can go home and make some more, whatever I want. And 3 years later, I still don't have it. So let that be a lesson to you. Don't sell your tools. But then what I do have, I do have this one left, which is just a sort of a stubby version of that Tomahawk handle profile. And this is made out of some sort of tool steel. I don't remember what now. And just welded onto a stick, essentially. And so this is like when I do any kind of forging on the eye. Ideally, with this technique, you don't have to actually forge the eye that much once it's wrapped up. But if I do, I try to do it on this as opposed to that cast iron one. But the nice skinny taper on the cast iron one is helpful for doing the initial opening and whatever of that eye. So they do get they do get used, both of them. And so, anybody have any questions about that stuff right now?
Going back to the Tomahawk handles, does Dunlap's Woodcraft sound familiar?
That's probably it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they got them in all different kinds of wood. And, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, some of them look pretty high end.
Yeah, but you know, you can get it. I just get the cheap ones. They're made out of hickory, and like buying a big lot of them, I just said these are gonna all get destroyed, so don't make them fancy. And I can't remember how much they charge me a piece, but they're actually pretty affordable if you don't go for the high end model. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put this piece of tool steel in the forge, and we'll just forge out this blank while we're chatting. You know, I don't use a lot of fussy tooling. All of this stuff that I've been using the power hammer for can pretty easily be done just by hand forging. And I've made these things exclusively by hand before, and it's small enough material that it's not problematic. I use the hammer because it's faster, and as a person who uses my arms to make my living, I've been blacksmithing now, as John so eloquently pointed out, almost 20 years on some level or another. And so, you know, my shoulders and whatever are starting to feel the effects of that. And so, I use the hammer for as much stuff as I can, but at the end of the day, so I'm going to use the knife maker's trick here and kind of pre-curve this piece of tool steel. Just like that. Maybe even go just a little bit more. Actually. And I just mentioned this. I don't know if there was any sort of questions about this, but now when I forge out that edge, I want to basically create kind of like a knife profile so that the tailing end or the end that's facing towards the eye of this tool steel bit is really thin, so there's not like an inclusion there when I forge weld it. And so by doing this, when I pound this thin, it'll bring it back to straight. And this is just a piece of 5160 that I just sliced a slab off the bar. The only reason I chose this is because I have it in vast quantities as opposed to some other tool steel, but any kind of tool steel will work for this. And as we discussed earlier, you don't even really have to use tool steel. You could just make these out of mild steel and those welded together. 5160 can be a little bit fussy in the heat treating. And so I've broken a lot of really nice things made out of 5160 in the heat treating process. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. But it's wouldn't necessarily be my first choice if I had a choice of anything that I could use for this process. You know, as in a lot of blacksmith shops for the history of the world. A little bit challenging. So I'm just going to forge out this edge. I'm going to work both sides of it. around. And a little bit warm. I guess that's as good a time to talk about the forge as any. This is just a propane gas forge. It's got an Art Anderson burner. It's made with tapered and stacked soft bricks. You can either actually cut and stack in an arch, and then it's backed up with insulating fiber frac insulation, super wool. And then the doors are cast out of Mizzou. Everything's painted with ITC 100. And this forge is super efficient. It costs me about $1 an hour to run it. And as long as I can keep the doors closed pretty well, it rips. And it's about ready for a rebuild. I've rebuilt it twice already in its life. But I do about 90% of my work out of this forge. And so when I built it, I didn't have natural gas in my shop. And now I do. And so when I do a shop tour, I'll show you my bigger forge, but which is natural gas. If I was going to build a brand new forge, I would use natural gas. But this one, even though it's propane, is still very efficient. So it's an atmospheric, it's a Venturi burner, an atmospheric burner. It doesn't have a separate blower. These particular burners are meant to run at really high pressure. So I run, like right now, it's running at almost 50 psi. So it's really high pressure, but low volume. It's got a tiny little orifice, and that pressure creates basically what amounts to a jet engine. So they're not the quietest forges, but they sure do rip.
What other tool steels do you use for your bits?
You know, any kind of tool steel is fine. 1084 is equivalent to 01 pretty much, but just a simple carbon tool steel. And, you know, if I had my brother, that might be my first choice. But W1, you know, anything that you can forge weld, which the knife makers are forge welding pretty much everything these days. And so you can see I might have curved it just a hair too much. We're creeping up on it. This is, you know, I've got my edge pretty thin, and you can see I still got a hair of a hump in it. So I'm just going to work it back out to mostly straight. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to mark it and cut it off, and we'll continue on.
For those of you who are interested, it looks like the bids are up to $135.
Oh, God. I wasn't responding to the bids. I was responding to how hot my forge is. It's difficult. Get in and out of there. So typically at this point, I'd be turning down my forge if I was just kept running sort of normally, because it's actually, and this forge, if just left to own devices would eventually just melt itself down. But, you know, as far as general forging practice, I want everything to be as hot as possible when I'm forging. You know, I was fortunate enough to take some classes from Peter Ross when I was a young blacksmith, and one of his mantras was, you know, and we call him, affectionately call him one heat Pete, because the amount of work that he could do with one heat was just so, especially at that time, just blew my mind. And one of his mantras was every heat is a welding heat. And so when he was hand forging, every heat would come out white, because that period between like white and bright orange is where the material is going to move the fastest and the best. And so, you know, he was able to do really incredible work. And super quickly and efficiently by making sure his material is hot. So right now I'm just trimming off the sort of bulged out end of this thing, and a little bit, flatten it out, brush it off, and let's go over here where a piece was that we made before. And I'm just going to sort of mark the length of material that I want. And I'm not too fussy about this. When I set these up, I like the tool steel to hang out just a bit, so that the mild steel doesn't necessarily wrap around it there at the end. It's a little wonky, but I'm just going to take a light heat on this. I'm going to mark it. My cutoff hardy is ground thusly. It's getting a little bit ragged. I like to keep this thing really sharp, but this allows me to have a nice clean cut on one side, and you know, I can get a cut with virtually no rag. That's a very square shoulder, and it's set up so I can turn it both directions in my hardy hole, and it's pretty equally wobble free. So having a properly shaped cutoff hardy, sort of one of my pet peeves with blacksmithing. Most of the places that I teach at, the hardies are not properly shaped. That was a little aggressive. I didn't mean to cut that off quite so quickly, but and so anyway, I have really specific ideas about a hardy cutoff tool should be a hot cut. And so if you think of a hot cut profile that you would use for hot cutting, that's what you want your hardy tool to be. And if it's anything other than that, it's wrongly shaped. So there you go. Okay, so there's my little piece. It's a little bit wonky, but I'm going to grind all the scale off, and I'll just tune up the shape a little bit over there at the grinder. So that's that. Do we have any questions at the moment?
I'm watching the chat right now. I think we've answered most of them.
That's great. I must be doing a really good job explaining myself. So I'm going to pop out of the screen real quick and just grind these two surfaces, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've just gone over to my belt grinder and removed all the scale from these two things here, and I'm just gonna move the camera now to a slightly different angle where you can see my post vise, and we'll wrap up this eye, and then I'll probably jump over and grind off the tool steel bit before I shove it in there, and we'll keep moving here. So, switch this, go on through this. I was experimenting with this a little bit earlier and trying to get a shot that I don't totally block your view of what's going on, but we'll try this. And just to also piggyback on what John's saying again, all of us board members are volunteers as well. And so the only reason any of this is happening right now is because of volunteer effort. The NWBA does have 2 paid staff, Claire and Patricia, and they've both done just a really incredible job helping us through this. But those of us who are your board members are doing this out of the goodness of our heart. And if anybody wants to volunteer in any way, get in touch with us, because these things do take a certain amount of effort to put on. And the only way anything happens in this organization is because the volunteering up to the plate actually doing it. And so if you have an idea about how something might be better or something else that can be done, feel free to raise it, but also understand that without you actually raising your hand to volunteer, you're just adding to the workload. Your suggestion is just adding to the workload of some very hard-working other volunteers. So you can see, so I don't get these all scaled up, I'm just taking the seat on the middle with my torch, and I've got this drift in here, and I'm just gonna kind of go thusly and get it started. And then I'm gonna come over to my handle and that going. Of course, the tongs that I want aren't where I left them. This is my problem with the eternity. But so this is where we're at right now, and you can see I've done a pretty good job of keeping things even. Got a little bit extra here, and that's okay. I'll just tune that up on the belt grinder before I put everything together. But we've got these pieces lined up. I'm not going to fret too much about the shape of the eye right now. We'll tune, once this thing is all forge welded together, we'll tune that up. And yeah, so that's that. And yeah, I'm still missing my tongs I need, but we'll figure that out here, I guess, shortly. So while I'm waiting for that thing to cool down for a minute, I'm gonna pull off this piece of tool steel and go grind the scale off of it, and then we'll put it together.
Bids are up to 150 bucks. I was sitting here fretting about his missing pair of tongs. I know that I could spend 10 minutes wandering around my shop trying to find him if I put him down someplace funky.
Well, I might have to do that. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know if you can see me. I don't think you can really see me from where y'all are at, but I neglected to put on my respirator, which is not something I would typically do when I'm using a belt grinder. These abrasives are super toxic, and so full of all sorts of heavy metals, and so you definitely don't want to get into the habit of grinding with any kind of bonded abrasive without a proper respirator. And so anybody who's been in the metalworking trade has probably done their fair share of grinding without a respirator. But you know, as I get older, I'm becoming more sensitive and also just more aware of my, ultimate health. My wife and I took in a kid this year. He was a 6-year-old. He's now a 7-year-old. He's awesome. He might make a kid at some point, but so things like that, I guess, change your perspective on your ultimate longevity is your health. But I do say that I was wearing a respirator before that happened. But,
Yeah, I went into a guy's shop some time ago. He had a sign on his wall said, "Everything in this shop can burn you, cut you, poison you, or otherwise try to kill you. The cumulative effects of what blacksmithing can do to you can be quite harmful. So, in the words of Mike Rowe, safety third."
exactly.
So, what kind of respirator do you prefer?
It's sitting right here on my table. I wear one of these. It's just a standard 3 ounce, whatever that is. You can probably see the thing. I found these to be very comfortable, and they're reasonably affordable. And all these people that complain that they can't wear a mask all day, I just will say that's sorry for my language, but I have to wear that thing all day some days, and while it might not be comfortable, it's definitely doable. And so, this COVID thing is not something to mess around with, and just wear your mask. So anyway, this is what I've got for my piece of tool steel. It's pretty thin. I've just tuned up the shape of it a little bit. And
Somebody pointed out there's a pair of tongs just under the nut of your vise in front of the camera there. So don't know if
no,
those
those
are the
are the
ones.
tongs I use. No, I appreciate that. Those are not the ones. I found the ones. They're over here where I'm gonna weld this thing up. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna move this off a little bit. And so, this is how that's going to fit in there, roughly. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go over to my welding machine and clamp this together and just put a tack weld on the top and bottom to hold this in. Some people might call it cheating, but I call it being practical. There's no shame in using modern technology to make your life a little bit easier. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just hit this quick on the wire wheel to knock the extra scale off. My MIG welder's out of gas, and I thought I had a full tank. And when I went to put the full tank on, it was empty, and I guess my helper didn't write empty on it when he changed it out. And so I didn't have the chance to go refill it. So I'm going to just do this with my TIG welder real quick, and I'll be right back.
So have a little bit more side chatter about safety issues coming up about the forges. From Charlie asking about what kind of ventilation do you have in your shop, and do you use a carbon monoxide detector? I will jump in and strongly recommend anybody who's using Gas Forge definitely spend the money on a carbon monoxide detector, put it somewhere in your shop.
So here we go. I did a little bit of a sloppy job on this, but it's going to be fine. I've just tacked this sucker in here, little tack, and once we do our initial forge weld, I'm going to grind off that extra, and so it won't really be an issue. And so there we go. And to add to that discussion, you know, ventilation is something that I care deeply about. I have some giant roll-up doors in my shop, which you'll see when I do the tour, and I have those open even if it's raining or snowing or whatever. One of my dreams is to, and one of the sort of future projects is to put a really proper positive ventilation system into my shop. And it hasn't happened quite yet, but it will happen. I'm going to go ahead and push this baby in. I'm going to move you all back in a little bit closer. So I am not a master forge welder, but you know, it's also not rocket science. There's a lot of people that are talking about welding without flux and things like that these days. I'm not necessarily one of those people. If I had my coal forge running right now, I would be doing this out of coal. That's how I prefer to forge weld, but I don't have that opportunity. But what I'm doing is I'm just getting it kind of warm, and now I'm going to put some flux on it. The flux that I'm using is just standard borax. There's, you know, it could be a topic of great discussion within the blacksmithing community about which flux is best or which flux is not best. But once again, this is the flux that I have. And so for me, it is the best that I have. I'm going to turn down the air on my forge a little bit to just create a little bit more of a reducing atmosphere in there. Oxygen is what causes scale. Scale is the enemy of good forge welding. And so if you can create a reducing atmosphere, which means there's more oxygen or less, there's more fuel than oxygen. So you can see by these flames coming out, that's essentially unburned fuel that's meeting the oxygen that's in the ambient air and combusting. And so that's what you want for a forge welding situation. And this forge is just screaming hot right now, and so it's not going to take long at all to get up to temperature. And there's oftentimes a lot of sort of mystery and intrigue that surrounds forge welding, but in my experience, it's not really. It's just about having a good atmosphere and having nice, clean material and getting it hot. And that's the most important thing. So I'm going to start up by the eye and work out. I'm not going to hit this very hard. It doesn't really take a lot of force if you have everything else in right. And I also, the material is really hot, and I don't want to like forge it out a whole bunch. So I'm just going to kind of use quick blows, and I'm up to heat. So I'm basically pretty much white hot, the same color as the forge in there. And we've got So I'm feeling pretty good about that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my angle grinder and just knock off these edges here, and then go back in for another forge welding heat. So I've just cleaned that up just a little bit, and so I'm going to go ahead and put some more flux on it, and put it back in here. On the topic of future discussions, John mentioned to me that he had an idea about having a fireside chat in the future, or some sort of forum to discuss forge building and forges in general. There seem to be a lot of questions that come up during these demos about forges, and I've built a lot of forges over the years, and it's something that I have very definite ideas about. And instead of wasting a lot of time during this forum on that, I think that's a great idea, and so that may be something that you can look forward to here in the future. So for the first time today, I'm going to switch hammer. I'm not a guy who uses like a ton of different hammers. This is a hammer that is my main forging hammer that I made several years ago, and it just got kind of a round face on one end and a nice flat square face on the other. And I don't know, for about 75% of my forging, that seems to work pretty good. This is my other most commonly used hammer, which is a very vintage rounding hammer that's seen a lot of abuse in its life, but I got it for $5 at a conference, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, and I've had it in service ever since. Maybe it was longer ago than that. And so I always used to use a cross beam, but I don't anymore. I mean, I do on occasion, but I'm too worried about it. So that heat, you'll notice I only work just kind of the area where that bit is welded in. And then I stop. And so, and this is one area when you're forge welding that I try to be really diligent about my brushing. Keep that scale off of there, just like that. And so I'm going to take another heat now. Good practice when you're forge welding is that once you've made a forge weld like this, all your heat should be fluxed and at welding heat.
Well, thanks to Phil Stringer for bumping the bids up to $200 and then having to take off for the day.
I really appreciate that, you guys. You know, more than just getting a tomahawk, you can think of it as a donation to the NWBA. And this organization, you know, it was my first real exposure to blacksmithing back in the early 2000s, maybe 2002 or so was when I went to my first NWBA conference in Mount Vernon and got some tools and learned some stuff. And it was NWBA members who helped me get my first forge built and all of that. And I'll show you on our shop tour my first anvil that I built for myself. I was in the welding program at CTC at Bellingham Technical College at the time. And so, you know, it's hard, you know. I've got a business to run. I'm trying to survive. I've got, you know, an empire to maintain here, and plus we just got ourselves a kid this year, so there's a lot of other pressures on my time and everybody's time. And but this organization, I owe a lot to this organization, and I'm happy to do these things and work on the board because you know, really in a large way, the NWBA is responsible for me being able to be a blacksmith. And it's one of the best blacksmithing organizations in the whole country, hands down. And so we go anywhere and people know about the NWBA and their history sort of reviving the craft. So I'm going to come in here and weld up these edges a little bit. So it's starting to look pretty good. We're getting on in time here, so I'm going to expedite this process a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to do kind of some. Now that I'm pretty confident in my forge weld, I'm going to once again keep this thing really screaming hot. But I'm going to go ahead and forge it out a little bit to try to get my final shape. You saw me use the angle grinder a little bit previous to that last heat, and that was because I just had like the slightest little misalignment between the layers, and there was an edge there that easily could have just been welded in, but then my seam that you might see at the end would be off center, and so that was just a little, it was probably a 0.5 millimeter or something. But I just wanted to clean that up a little bit, tune it up, and that could have easily been done with a hot wrap or some kind of hot file. And if I saw anybody grinding on my anvil the same way that I was doing that, holding the grinder with one hand, they'd probably be forever banned from my shop. But because it's my anvil and my grinder, it's not, you know, you see a lot of anvils that have been screwed up from people doing stupid stuff like that.
So Silas, after that goes back in the fire, could you please show us a close-up of those tongs?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
And thanks again for keeping the safety aspects foremost in our mind while you're doing these things, even when you're setting maybe not the best example, but like we said earlier, this is an inherently dangerous hobby, so none of it's worth injuring yourself or getting killed over.
That is absolutely true. I was just talking to my kid yesterday. He was asking when he gets to learn to drive the forklift, and one of the things that I told him is that no matter what is on that forklift, well, first what I told him is that before he gets to learn to drive the forklift, he has to learn to be a really effective ground man. And whether that's moving dunnage or getting cords out of the way or whatever it is, you got to be able to foresee all that stuff. But what goes along with that is that whatever's on that forklift, whatever's in the crane, whatever's what, you know, none of that stuff is more valuable than your personal well-being. And so, you know, you should never allow somebody to ask you to do something unsafe. You know, I've seen a lot of things go wrong moving machinery, and the most important is self-preservation. So real quick, I can show these again. These are the tongs. I actually just made these yesterday, or I should say the day before yesterday, because the other ones that I had that were like this, I sold with that kit of stuff to make the tomahawks, and then I had never made myself another pair in 3 years. So these were just a real quick and dirty, hang it out. They started at 1/4 by 1 1/4 or 1/4 by 1, I'm sorry. So we're getting really close here. And some of this final stuff can be just cleaned up on the grinder. There's no need to belabor the process of tuning up these edges, but you will just kind of planish this thing out a little bit. So that's where we're at. And we're pretty close here. So now I'm just going to do the final shaping of the eye and maybe give it a quick grind, and then I'll just do a quick super down and dirty heat treat, and we'll be done. Are there any more questions about the tongs or any other tools at this point?
I'm scanning through the chat to see if I missed any questions. I don't think I have, but if somebody doesn't feel their question has been answered, please get it back to the bottom of our chat list here. We'll try to get any questions cleared up. So far, all the comments are coming through positive, Silas. This is a really cool demo.
Awesome. Well, you know, I always second guess myself when I'm doing stuff like this and whatever, but I'm glad that it's appreciated. This is a little bit of a disembodied experience, just talking to my shop. I am not a YouTuber or somebody who's really familiar with doing this type of thing, and so this is good. It's a good learning experience for me, and yeah, I'm glad that it's hopefully, you know, it's helpful and well received. So
Yeah, it really is disorienting to sit here and talk into a computer with little or no feedback. For those of you who are on the other end of it, I hope we're doing well. The other thing is, if you think you are interested in doing this kind of thing, please let us know. We're looking for demonstrators and people that can help out on this kind of thing. The bids are up to $2 1/4.
awesome, you guys. That's really great. And whoever wins these things, I'll make them, you know, send them out extra nice for you. So.
Don't forget to get your touch mark in them.
Yeah, I'll do that for sure. So now you know, this is a little bit of a fussy part of it. Just trying to get this eye shaped properly. I have this kind of all-purpose bolster I use for a bunch of different stuff. It's just nothing more than a donut, an oblong donut, and it seems to work pretty good for this. Once again, this is, you know, these Tomahawk eyes are a little bit challenging because of, because they're so thin, it's hard to like really get a proper bolster setup going on. But yeah, we just make do. And not, you know, the whole idea is to not bung up these like nice little edges you've got going on down here. So I'm just trying to make sure that this eye is nice and hot as I'm working it. One of the biggest problems making tomahawks is having that forge weld start to split back apart as you're forcing this drift through there. And so we're just, you know, doing whatever I can to minimize the likelihood of that happening.
Someone asked about the tools you've got in the pouch on your hip.
All that's really in there right now is my ruler, but usually I have my soapstone holder in there, and a lot of times a flashlight, and then it's also set up. I do a lot of a big texturing job, and because of the nature of the tooling of that, I need to have a ratchet, and I have a ratchet in there with a 3/4 inch socket on it, so I can take on and off my quarter bar with these. And so it's sort of set up. Sometimes I put my cell phone in there when I'm not taking videos of myself or broadcasting myself to the world. So David Tuthill affectionately calls it my fetish pouch. But it's just handy for me to have something that I can keep my tools handy in. I've pretty much given up on wearing Carhartt, which have like a lot of nice side pockets, and so I had to figure out some other way to deal with all that stuff. Okay, so now I've got my actual tool steel grip, and I'm just gonna kind of forge out this eye a little bit.
If you're done with the power hammer, you may want to push your camera around so we can catch the bick of your anvil there.
Sure, I can do that.
There you go.
So the eye's starting to look pretty good. I just need to squeeze it out just a little bit more. So gonna goof around with it here a little bit more, and in the interest of time, I might, before, you know, as with all blacksmithing, these, you know, just one more heat is a common mantra, but oftentimes it can take a lot of fun. And so I'll give this one or two more heats and then stop belaboring the point. and then move on. And if I need to tune it up a little bit after we're done, I'll do that before dipping out. So. The last thing we need to do is spend all day watching me just trying to make it perfect. I was working construction. My mom's a home builder, and so besides blacksmithing, I also build houses periodically. I used to work with this guy. I worked for a big, long development project with this guy, Francisco. And he would always say, Silas, not a piano. And at that time, I had been working for a bunch of high-end blacksmiths doing all these really fancy projects. And, you know, everything has to be perfect. And really, that's probably not the best way to go through your life because it makes it hard to get things done. So I have to battle that myself, and I have a running joke with all my helpers where I tell them, they're like, how does this look? And I say, as long as it's perfect, I'll be happy. And they, you know, I don't know if they find it funny or not. When you're the boss, you get to make the jokes, and it doesn't matter if your helpers find it funny. Go in here, I'm going to pound this sucker in. Got to be careful so I don't break my forge well. I'm just going to actually forge this out a little bit. Try to stretch it just a scotch. Shape it. So one problem that happens pretty frequently when you're doing this is that these little insides get pushed in and then you can't get your drift in far enough. And so I might even take just a spot heat with the torch and try to clean those up a little bit, maybe going from the other side, and then we'll see where we're at, but we're really close on this. I don't know if you all could see my torch rig before. That show up in the picture?
Just outside the edge. If you bring it over just a couple inches, it'll be good. There you go, right there.
I can't bring it over too far, but maybe I can.
That's it.
Rotate the camera.
No, that's good.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this I feel like is a really important part of blacksmithing. It's called a gas saver. This little valve, and it allows me to just have my torch hanging here with the gas on already adjusted, and I can just light it. Those of you who watched Anton's demo the other day, last week or whatever that was, he was really happy to have been able to get one of these from Russia, and no other Russian blacksmiths have them. And I think that maybe the first time he saw one was for the demo he did for us. I brought mine down, and he was able to use it and was really thrilled. And so, but this is absolutely one of the most important tools in my shop. And I use it all the time, and I would be lost without it. So that's where having that nice long taper comes in. And it's pretty important. And now when I put this thing back in there, I'll be a little bit closer to where I want to be. Ta-da!
It's that gravity thing. I keep saying it sucks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. You all get the picture. I'll come back and tune this up a little bit later. I'm going to go through just a quick heat treat, So you all can see how I do this, how blacksmiths of old would have done this. And then I'll do a quick shop demo. We're already past noon, just barely. So anyway, yeah, we're almost home. These fancy things. So I'm just going to go over and knock some scale off on my wire wheel and get this just very basically prepped, and then we'll just heat treat it here with the torch and move on with our lives.
So on behalf of all of us, I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us for the duration of this demo. We schedule these things for a certain period of time, but we know they're not necessarily going to run that way. And in this particular case, the content has been awesome. It's well worth every minute of it. So thanks, Silas, for sticking it out, and everybody else to stick around watching it. So did you make that bolster yourself?
The donut one?
Yeah, the donut.
Yep. I pretty much made everything myself. Obviously not my anvil, but pretty much every pair of tongs I have, I've made myself. You know, not necessarily every hammer, but most of my hammers I made myself. Not out of some just like puritanical desire to do so, but just sort of out of practicality and a lack of financial resources. So, so what I've done, am I in the frame well enough here?
Yes, you are.
So, let's see here. What I have here is a vat of coconut oil that's mostly solidified, but this is what I'm going to use to quench this. 5160 in my experience likes a little bit of a slower quench, and it also doesn't need to get all that hot. And if you overheat it or quench it too fast, like even with unheated oil, you know, the specs call for your oil to be at 100-something degrees when you quench 5160. And so instead of heating up my quenching oil and breathing the nasty fumes, I found that coconut oil actually works pretty good. It's a little bit slower. And this is a scenario where you don't need like ultimate edge performance. We're just trying to toughen up this edge. We actually don't want it to be too hard so that if you do hit the back of your other tomahawk or whatever, hopefully you don't break out a big chunk of the one you're throwing, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat it up. Instead of trying to get the edge really hot, I'm going to work it kind of from the back. And it's really bright in my shop right now, so the coloring is going to be sort of deceptive. But I do have a magnet here, which I'll kind of use to check to see if I've reached critical temperature. You know, heat treating of something like this could be a whole topic unto itself. But I don't know how the color is showing up there, but I'm kind of in a dark red right now, and I'm still a little bit magnetic, so. I'm just really trying to creep up on it. And now I'm non-magnetic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that 3 times. So I'm going to let it sort of just air cool, and this is going to be called normalizing, and it allows the grain structure inside of that tool steel to sort of align itself. And by not getting it too hot or letting it soak for too long above critical temperature, I'm not going to promote excessive grain growth. And so I'm back down. I've got back magnetic again. So I'm going to go ahead and go back up. now that I know my color, I'm just going to do it by color. I'm not going to fuck with the magnet every time. So just in this process, you can see how convenient that torch setup is. And that was honestly one of the first tools that I bought when I started my own business. I think I found it on eBay or something and then built this stand myself. Harold Haya, who was an old NWBA member, built me the torch. He owned Hanson and Miller, which is a regulator and torch rebuilding service. And it's been great. This is a Harris torch. It's got a little bit bigger volume than the regular torches. I'm just going to quiet my shop down a little bit here. Yeah, Harold is great, and I haven't heard from him for a while. I know he had some health problems, so I'm hoping he's doing okay. So now that I've done that twice, I'm going to go ahead and heat it up, and then I'm going to quench it in this oil. Like I said, I don't need something that's diamond hard for this. I just want a good tough edge. So anyway. Maybe if I move this over, I'm just like moving this thing around quite a bit. And we're getting a little burny. That's one thing about coconut oil, is it's got a little bit of a lower flash point than what we might otherwise want. But I use this coconut oil for seasoning cookware. I make a lot of spatulas and serving spoons and stuff like that. And I have this big pot of it so that I can get my stuff hot and just dunk it in here. And when doing production work, it saves me a lot of time. So, so it's pretty well cooled off. I'm going to go to the water now and just cool it off to touch. Still a little bit warm. Of course, I had a file here. Okay, so here's the file, and you know, it's not super hard, but it's pretty hard. I mean, a file is raking over, and this is actually a pretty sharp file, and so I'm going to call that good. I'm probably going to have to heat this all up and tune it up a bit, so I'll treat this before it gets mailed out. But you know, that's the basic process right there. That's old-fashioned blacksmith hardening and quenching, and then now we're going to temper it. I'm just going to run over and knock some scale off and clean this up real quick, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how I temper with the torch. So I'm going to clean this thing off also just with some denatured alcohol, of which there's just a couple dribbles in this thing, but the oil, any kind of oils on here will affect the tempering colors. And so anyway, it's a good idea after you've quenched an oil to do something to mitigate that. And
sure
so
you
I've
want,
just, what's that?
I was going to say, do you want to move that alcohol before you light the torch?
Well, there's almost nothing in there, but that's probably not a bad idea. I mean, alcohol is not, it is flammable, but it's not really that dangerous. You know, if you pour out some alcohol on the floor or whatever and light it on fire, a pretty soft flame. It's not like explosive or anything. And so, but yes, and then the name of setting a good example, we'll do that. So I've just cleaned the surface oxides off, and I'm gonna look for like a deep straw color and maybe just fading into purple is the color that I'm going for tempering here. And so anyway, I'm gonna start heating it down here, and I want that temperature to creep up as slowly as possible. And my goal is to allow that temperature to creep up super, super slow and not have to quench it to stop it. So this is like an almost impossibly tedious process when you're just sitting there waiting for it to move, because if you jump the gun and heat it too much, you'll blow it, and then you'll have to go quench it, which is not the end of the world either. So I'm just going to heat it down here. You can see that scale popping off. So if I was cleaning this up, and maybe even just right now, I'll kind of use that to my benefit and get in here and brush it. And because this is mostly mild steel, I don't know how well these colors are coming through, but you can see sort of a gray blue down here, and then we have our spectrum of tempering colors. Can you guys see this okay? Is this a decent spot here?
You get it just a little bit closer. I know you don't want to get too close to your camera, but
oh, it's okay.
there you go. There you go. There you go.
So you can see the spectrum, and it's just creeping up now. And this is the point where you're going to be really tempted to go back in with the torch and heat this thing up some more, because you're like, I don't know if it's ever going to do it or not. And in my experience, I don't know, I might just barely hit it, but this is kind of where I want to be, where you saw I just heated it here a little bit, you know, and that rosebud that I have is super hot. So it gets the job done pretty quick. But what I want to do is, ideally, I pulled out just a piece of, this is just some extra castable refractory that I poured out into a puddle at one time, and now it's broken up into some pieces. But it's basically a fire brick that I set, and ideally I'd be able to just set this thing down there and walk away from it. And when I came back, it would be all a nice, even golden, dark amber color, and that would just make me super happy. But I might give it just a quick touch. I'm still saying just down here, I want these colors to run, you know. That's what you hear talked about in blacksmithing literature, is watching the temper colors run. And so here you can see I've likely overdone it. This stuff is moving up really fast now. And if I was to let this go, it would probably be overdone. But that's why I get to tell you not to do things and then do them anyway and suffer the consequences. So this is looking really good to me. I don't know how well the colors are coming through. There's still some coconut oil inside of here that's smoking in my face, but you can see my edge is just starting to turn purple, so I'm going to go ahead and cool it off. And I'm just cooling it off by dunking it in the water, but, you know, for our purposes here, that's a totally sufficient temper. And you can see that nice color gradient as it goes up. You can still see the nice seam of where the forge weld happened. That will likely disappear once I sharpen this thing up. But anyway, here we go. this is normally the portion of the demo where people would be clapping and getting up out of their chairs and wandering off and all that.
We are,
stuff.
but you
And,
just can't hear us.
well, I know it's such a it's a weird situation. So anyway, now I am going to give you all a quick shop tour. And now that I'm looking at my phone, I can see people, Bart and Anthony, both saying that they're clapping. So I really appreciate you guys. And thank you everybody for sticking around and watching this. And thanks to the NWBA for continuing to be awesome and making all this happen. So I'm just going to give you all a quick tour around. If anybody has questions, let me know. So this is my power hammer. This is maybe a more better view of it than what you all saw before. It's an Anyang 165, like I said before. This is my forge. So I've got the doors hung from these rollers, and then they're just counterweighted down, and I found this to be a super effective solution to forge opening and closing, and so you can kind of see the construction there. And I've got a rubble floor in there. I am 100% fan of a rubble floor. All of those surfaces radiate heat off. So a flat floor has just a sort of very finite amount of surface area to radiate heat back into the forge. A rubble floor has infinite surface area to radiate back into the forge. And it also allows all the sort of goo that happens from melted scale, or if you are forge welding in your forge, to sort of melt back down through there and not create a big puddle. So we'll talk more about forges in the forge building demonstration. Here's my post vise. Here's my coal forge waiting to be set up. I put a chimney in when I had to replace the roof on my shop last year, and so it's all ready to go. I've got a tong rack. I've got my fly press there. It's a number 6 fly press. I use that thing all the time. Here's my newest forge. I just built this one to replace a big forge that just left my shop. It belonged to a buddy of mine. And so this is a natural gas forge. It's really big and powerful. It's got a lot of volume. It's set up on this big table so the whole thing can be lifted up and configured in a variety of different ways. There's the blower and gas valve set up for anybody's interested. It's got a Pine Ridge burner. Sorry, I just had a little brain fart there. This is my Diacro power bender with a bunch of crap piled on top of it at the moment, but for making bending things, that's a real handy tool. So I go out here. Sorry, everybody. This is from my open shop door. This is kind of a view of my shop. Those bikes that are hanging up in the corner there are sort of where it all began. This is one of my big layout tables with a template for a live edge table that I am going to be making some legs for next week, forging some sort of tree looking legs. So these bikes up here are sort of where it all began. And you know, when I first made myself a blacksmith shop in my house or in my garage, when I was dropped out of college, that's what I made to start out with. So this is my hydraulic press. It unbolts off this stand and bolts to my platen table. And there's my platen table all covered with stuff. This big platen right here I use for flattening stuff on my platen table with the hydraulic press when I'm doing texturing work. So that eliminated just a giant amount of labor to be able to do that. This is kind of my grinding department. Back here, I got a 2x72 Fear belt grinder that's made in Portland. That is a great grinder and fairly I mean, it costs real money, but it's I've been very happy with it and would absolutely recommend it to anybody who's in the market for one of those. So this is the steel hoarding department. I try to keep my shorts and everything reasonably well organized. This is, chaotic at times. This is my Ellis bandsaw. I would highly recommend an Ellis bandsaw to anybody if you're starting your own shop or need a new bandsaw. This is a 1600. I would get a 1600 or any size bigger than that. This is one of the first tools I bought when I went into business for myself, and has cut every piece of steel just about that's gone through my shop, and it's very accurate. It cuts accurate, repeatable miters and accurate, repeatable lengths. It's not the fastest saw, but it makes up for it with just general good use. I've got another big bandsaw right there that needs some work at the moment. This is my all metal drill press. This is one of my favorite tools in the shop. This is the nicest drill press money can buy. It's made in Germany, and a new one of these, the equivalent model, brand new, costs about $30,000, and they're typically only bought by people like Boeing or government organizations or whatever. This is the sort of junk pile. This is the reality part of my blacksmith shop, where I've got big layout tables just covered in crap. Here's my lathe. This is a Monarch built in 1913, Monarch Model A, and it's serviceable for my purposes as a blacksmith, but it's sort of like driving a Model T around. Same vintage and pretty equivalent technology. And so while it does work and do the things that I need it to do typically, at some point I'd love to get a more modern lathe. Anyway, there's my kind of maintenance bench and sorted tool hoarding. And here's the family bicycle department. And this is my wood shop over here. So it's a mess right now, but during quarantine, it has actually been sort of put together in such a way that it's a little bit more functional to use. And I've been doing some projects in here, and this pile of wood back here is all Alaskan yellow cedar and red cedar, and then miscellaneous stuff on top. It's part of my intergenerational lumber hoarding problem. My in-laws just sold their place of many years, and my father-in-law brought his lumber hoard that he sawed. He used to horse log, and he's also had a blacksmith shop and did horse logging and had a sawmill at one point and all that. So anyway, there's all of that. Over here, and slightly less clutter, but I've got a little gallery area here where I've got some wares and some miscellaneous junk hoarding and records of previous jobs that I've done and other things. So samples, different kind of stuff. There's some spatulas you can see, and if I had had a whole nother day to get ready, I probably would have tidied this up a little bit more. Here's one of my tools that I'm really excited to get into service. It's a little bit backlit right now, but the 36-inch Oliver bandsaw. So I can cut anything with that I can pick up one end of. So that is that. And yeah, so that's my shop. I did notice there was a comment that says this is a pretty grand space, and I feel super fortunate for it. We bought this property in foreclosure 7 years ago. Here's more wood, so my lumber rack is full. This is yellow cedar, red cedar, old growth fir, and then this stack right here is all old growth clear redwood. So if anybody wants that, get in touch with me and I'll sell it to you for a lot of money. So just quickly, we'll go out here because this is kind of my favorite space. And it's really bright out here, but here's my greenhouse and garden shed. And then this is our fruit and vegetable garden. We've got raspberries and blueberries and flowers, currants right there, and different herbs, fire pit. And the garden's a little crazy at the moment, but kind of my happy space. So anyway, there you all go. There's my beautiful face. You didn't get enough of that. So anyway, that's all I've got. If there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. But
I spotted two questions out of the chatter here. One was, how many square feet do you have total?
well, my shop building is. I'm just going to turn you around because I realized I didn't include. It's really backlit, but this is our house. A few years ago, I was able to shut down my business for a year and a half and totally gut and remodel the house. It was originally built in 1904. So there's the house, and then this is my shop building behind it. My big 3-bay doors. And so my shop building overall is about 4,200 or 4,300 square feet, but there's about a 900 square foot apartment in the front of it. And so, I don't know, I have a little over 3,000 square feet of shop space.
Cool.
There's our RV we got recently, which I'm pretty excited about. Quasar.
And the other remaining question I spotted was going back to your forge on the rubble floor. What do you use for the rubble?
Broken up hard bricks, and sometimes a combination of soft bricks. Just broken up fire bricks that, that as they get used in the shop, they tend to crumble up, or break or whatever. And so I just cycle those out when I'm building a new forge. I sit there with a cold chisel, or as the case may be, have my helper sit there with a cold chisel and just break them up into little chunks.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I'm going to let everybody get on with their day. It's 12:30 now, so that's probably enough of me talking at you. And yeah, go donate to the NWBA. And thank you all so much.